Going on, everyone? This is Jordan with Conquer Trading and Investing, and today we're going to be taking a look at Ethereum. Ethereum here is V recovery off the lows, trading just below 3,800, trading towards the all-time high of 4,800, and now we're starting to see some price targets being called out by lots of people out there, including Tom Lee, calling for a 10 to $15,000 price target on Ethereum. Let's start off with that. Let's just start off and hear what Tom is saying over here over the next minute or so.
I think in the near term, our technical strategist Mark Newton thought we could be seeing 4,000 before the end of the month for Ethereum, but that's not where it peaks.
That's a pretty good call. That's a pretty good call. I mean, I don't know when initially that call was put out there, but if they're saying that, you know what, by the end of the month, over the next week, we could see Ethereum trading around $4,000. I mean, it's just a stone throws away. That would be fantastic, and I think that's obviously well within range. Let's hear what he sees next, and just do our best to do our best to just give that a clear critical thinking.
Just think that that's the first target, and then I think something, if Sean Farrell's math is correct, then I think 10 to 15,000 actually makes sense too.
By the end of the
Yes, he's saying $10,000 to $15,000, and she's kind of clarifying. Do you mean by the end of the year?
year.
It could be end of year, it could be sooner. I mean, it just really depends. But and again, that wouldn't be the cap, but that just shows you that's really, a level above 5,000. It would be a decisive, all-time breakout for Ethereum. So
That should be pretty big, right? So obviously breaking above 5,000, that reminds us of what happened. Thanks, Ace. Appreciate that. For the last part, I raised the volume and specifically he was asked, do you mean by the end of the year? I mean by the end of July, $4,000 price target. It's well within range. That seems more than reasonable. When you start talking about by the end of the year, 10 to 15,000, is that something that's realistic and reasonable? And that's really what we want to address and what we want to talk about. And what he's saying is that once you break above 5,000, you're really in price discovery, and that could come and should come quickly. And look, we're going to do our best to set expectations about potentially what could happen. And we just want to jump over and remind us all what happened as we were looking at Bitcoin breaking to new all-time highs in 2020, the end of 2020, in December of 2020, Bitcoin taking out the previous high over here, 19,400. And you did see incredibly sharp price appreciation. Ethereum over the next couple of months was able to go from 20,000 to double to 40,000 and then hit $60,000. So could Ethereum potentially be setting up to do something like that? And you all know the work that we do here. And by the way, most importantly, if you're new here, welcome. But if you're not, welcome back, because you are who make it happen. CTM Strong. We have an ongoing conversation. And throughout that conversation, we try to make sure that we stay on the right side across markets. By the way, did you see the US dollar this morning? I have to go ahead and just peek in on the US dollar, as we're seeing potentially today on the close a sell impulse. You remember we just went on the buy impulse right where I'm highlighting in green, and we could have a flip-flop right over here and see really quick a sell impulse develop. We want to stay on the right side across markets. I'm going to leave this slide up right here because I want to come back to it right now. You can see that we've hit right now what our expectations were on the first burst, right? When we talk about first burst, just last week we were watching as the altcoins were just getting ready potentially to break out of this bull flag. Now, until you get the confirmed breakout, you don't know that it's going to be confirmed. Once it's confirmed, you're able to manage risk. You can see this yellow line is where we continue to have our stop loss over here. And sure enough, breakout, nice extension out. And we said likely, and notice this bit of resistance that we're coming into right over here up top. By the way, I've seen over the weekend, I saw Ben Cowan into the cryptoverse really honing in right now on for a lot of people that listen right now. you should be looking at a phase where you see a lot of altcoins bleeding into Ethereum. I think that's high signal, something that people should be paying attention to, which is why I go ahead and bring it to yours. Nevertheless, on this breakout, we said that likely the extension down we would see would be towards, right here where we are today. And does that mean the move is over, or that we're going to get some type of bounce on dominance? We're going to find out. If we break through this area of what is now support, at that point in time, we could be headed for a much bigger move. That could even send the altcoin market here potentially to new all-time highs as a collective market cap. But I want to focus on this area really quick over here with you. And that was the mega bull run of alts during 2017, peaking after Bitcoin. And the reason I want to do that for you is, are we still bad on the volume? Are we good on the volume? What's going on over here? Simon, let me know what's going on. And I think it was Tom you couldn't hear. And I'm gonna throughout this session here, I will help, like, I'll be consistent with saying what Tom said and then what our views are going to be. But what I want you to notice over here is we're seeing this sharp acceleration down. It's actually exactly where we thought that the potential first target would come into. And I want to point out, Jordan, is 70% Bitcoin dominance still in the cards? I think so. I think that if you were to get something like the Bitcoin Act passed and you see that massive adoption signal coming forth onto Bitcoin and then the race being set out, for sure we could see something like that. No question about it. Now, what I want to point out though is this area over here, and it's, even if alts really run, it's not straight down. You see moves down, then you see consolidation patterns. Next leg, consolidation patterns. Next leg. Again, here we have this sharp move down. We hit the first area, our expected target. Does that mean we're taking profits? Oh, no, absolutely not. Let's just check in and start off on the CTM algo dashboard. And we're beginning to see, obviously, some positions build up into profit. Ethereum now 46% into profit. It's coming off just another banger recently. And you go in and you look at the list of trades, and we had not too long ago another 48% on the long side. 48% on the long side coming off the short side over here, coming off the short side. And you could see that the turn. This is where you saw, or I saw, a lot of Bitcoiners, and true to form, I think that here we are the biggest Bitcoiners of them all. But you saw a lot of, I'll put quotes, Bitcoiners, and they were like posting the ETH Bitcoin pair chart, and they were like, and then caught by surprise, the move on the upside. That's why we trade a mechanical system. So we don't. That's why we trade momentum. And then you can see this trade now currently open, and it continues to move into profit. We continue to hold until momentum wanes and take us out of the trade. Because I tell you what, if we were to break out above 48,000, right? At that point, are we going to see something similar to what we saw back in 2021 when we took out that high? And then I'm going to come back to this facing reality stage in 1 second. And it's possible, right? I don't want to be taking profit into resistance if indeed this is going to be the move on Ethereum that takes it out. And if it's not, and as we come into this area of supply and we start to lose momentum going sideways, consolidating underneath resistance. What's something else that has done that recently? Recently, have we seen anything else? And have we been talking about something else consolidating underneath resistance? And I'm going to bring over here, and you notice that, like, pretend this is Ethereum 4,800. The move into it, the consolidation underneath resistance, and then the leg up. Maybe something like that's going to happen. And if we start consolidating or get rejected here, we'll exit our trade, and then eventually, if we get further downside, we'll be triggering off the downside, or when we finally get the break up, we will be participating. But this could very well be the one that goes ahead and breaks out. I mean, certainly there are a lot of people that are bringing back attention and positive sentiment into Ethereum. Number one is price alone. Like people are attracted to price, and people do not like price when it's trading low at 1600, and people will love price when it's trading above 5000. That's just the nature. That's when people that like price is the ultimate barometer of sentiment, and that will get people in. And we've seen some changing dynamics. As far as changing dynamics, number one, we are beginning to see, and run by Tom Lee. Tom Lee of BitMine is now going ahead and they're making a public company, a Bitcoin, I'm sorry, an Ethereum treasury company. They want to hold Ethereum on their balance sheet, taking the MicroStrategy playbook and bringing it to Ethereum. And then you have some mega large investors behind them. You saw Peter Thiel of Palantir, Peter Thiel of PayPal, Peter Thiel of First Institutional Investor into the Facebook, going ahead and taking a 9.1% stake in the company. He has a fantastic track record, and here he believes that. I was just thinking, he wrote a book that I read one time on a plane, and Peter Thiel's book was I forgot what it's called. I think it's about like some type of growth. I don't want to say S curve growth, something to do with growth. And he's very adamant on that all his businesses should basically be a monopoly. And I'm trying to think here, how is Ethereum a monopoly? What is he thinking? What is he thinking? That's what I want to know. Someone who has a history of being mostly correct. I think he was really wrong ultimately about Bitcoin, but you know what? Like you hear headlines, and headlines are good for getting people's attention, and you have to wonder when Tom Lee says by the end of the year that potentially Fundstrat analysts pointing to 10 to 15,000, do they believe that, or are they just trying to garner attention for their new business, this Ethereum treasury company? I don't know what the answer is to that, and I know that thankfully that we are able to navigate markets from a methodical, systematic perspective. However, when I look at this chart of Ethereum, something stands out to me. Something stands out to me, and when I look at this chart, I say, all right, let's go and look at and get our awareness over here by looking at what we see now is, and how many people now we're talking about two different things. A lot of people are talking about it's like, especially now as you see altcoins on the move, especially now as you see Ethereum on the move. A lot of people are talking about the window is going to be very brief, and we are moving towards the I don't want to say blow off, but a lot of people do believe we're headed towards a blow off. I'm going to say just rapid price appreciation. All the years you've done of holding on to these bags of altcoins are going to be worth it in just a moment, as you're going to see price just like 10, 20, 30x. I'm seeing that type of preparation from a lot of people. And then the other thing that I'm seeing now is a lot of people are saying, oh, wait a second, the nature of this cycle looks like it's changing, and it's changing due to the new participants and the amount of adoption taking place, and this cycle is not getting any close to ending. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about just really setting expectations and elaborating on brief nuggets I'm sharing here. But if you go back to Friday's video on the channel, on Friday we talked about what it looks like seasonality wise between now and not only through the summer, the rest of the summer, but definitely the first 3 weeks of September. And if we were to see at any point in time on S&P 500, on the Nasdaq, any type of like whatever 5%, 3, 8%, 7% correction, well within what would be the norm. And let's go ahead and just visualize this for you. And we're not trying to predict that's happening. You can see the seasonalities over here, and here's the end of September. Here's the first 3 weeks of September, and historically, it's just not the best. And then what you could see even right now, coming out of these past couple of weeks, we're in one of the most favorable seasonality periods of the year, and look what happened. We happened to match those seasonalities. Now we're trading at the top portion of the deviation, but we matched the seasonalities. And then you could see right now, as we had the end of July and in through August, a flat tape is well within the norm. What happens on August 1st? We don't know. We don't know whether or not we're going to see some more taco. And if we do, that should be really bullish for the market. Imagine this. This is August 21st, but imagine August 1st taco. You could see some favorable price action out of it. I'm trying to set expectations, and this is what your expectations should be set for until we move into the end of the year. And that's very important. And I've set expectations in so many ways. So many ways. And it's an ongoing conversation where every day we have to take in all the data. We have to stay in front of the macro and make sure we stay on the right side. And when the macro lines up, we talk about how the bull of all bulls, this right here is like listen carefully. As we talk about this cycle, the Bitcoin bull market doesn't get started. And this is coming from someone who called the bull market breakout at 17,250. Right over here, we called the bull market breakout in December 2022. We had a sell impulse back on the short side, back above 17,250. When sentiment was at its worst, FTX had just scammed the whole space. BlockFi blowing up, 3 Celsius had just blown up just a little while longer. Sentiment is at its worst, and we called the bull market breakout. Now, we did that, and we didn't know it was going to last. And we have our invalidation for when that's invalidated. But here we are 2.5 years later, and it's still going. And that whole time I've been saying that, listen, the bull of all bulls, Bitcoin is the bull of all bulls. It doesn't begin running until monetary policy aligns. And for me and for you, that means when the Federal Reserve ultimately has to go ahead and, drop rates down as close to the zero bound as possible and then run the printer. And eventually they're going to run the printer again. It's not going to be for a while, but it's going to be again. And when they do, that's when the bull of all bulls really runs. However, the macro is changing. It's changing, and it's not so much about what the Fed is doing right now, and it's becoming a lot more, and you've heard the word over the past couple of weeks, fiscal dominance instead of monetary dominance. And we're going to see, I strongly believe, and definitely over the next 18 months, the bull of all bulls really beginning to pick up some steam and begin to run. And it's not going to be because of monetary policy. It's going to be because of fiscal policy. A lot of people are really going to be blindsided. That's for tomorrow. We're going to so right now we're talking about Ethereum. That's the focus of today's conversation. But tomorrow, we're going to be really getting into it. Great big shout out to here, everyone on the live, not just the replay crew on the live. By the way, if you're a regular and you enjoy the work we do, make sure that you're alerted. Like, go ahead and make sure you have notifications set so that you are aware when we go live and when a new video is published, so that you could go ahead and make sure that you are up to speed. I'm looking at what we said over here in January of 2022. So you have in December of 2022, like peak negative sentiment. We didn't just do it on Bitcoin. We called soon after the breakout, and that was, for me, a close your eyes moment on the NASDAQ breaking out into the bull market. For me, it was a close your eyes moment because, again, sentiment was very, very bearish. Now, over here at the top, when we had, the mid-cycle pullback, and in July of 2021, people were getting really worried. I was like, I think it was lucky. I was like, by October, end of October, we're making a new all-time high. Sure enough, that happened. We did wave 1 into wave 2. And then we were looking for, and I was looking for a big push up. While back in 2019, my expectations were that the bull market would take us towards between 55 and 130,000. As we hit this mega move up, I expanded that projection. I thought at least at a minimum we were taking out 180,000, and I thought ultimately that we would be closer to 230, $240,000. And we didn't come anywhere close to that transpiring, but we did have the technical breakdown at $53,140. De-risk, something's wrong. That's a breakdown. That was the first de-risk that was offered out there. The second was on the break of 35,000. Once we broke down from over here, that was the second de-risk point given. And then the last one given said, you're not too late if you haven't done it yet. 27,000, ultimately price falling about another 40% from there, and then able to call the bull market breakout. At this point, though, when we did saw a changing 4-year cycle nature, I said, you know what, going forward, we'll make sure that we're very aware of 4-year cycle similarities, but this cycle, it's changing, and we have to make sure in real time we're able to see what's happening and adopt to it ourselves. Then 3 months later, we were able to launch what has become CTM, mechanical trading. And this has been absolutely, I mean, I don't know anything else like it in the markets. That's the truth. But we have a very long-term perspective. We're looking for calculated returns, for consistent returns over time. And we're looking to compete with the best of the best who ever was in the markets. If you think that's just easy and doesn't take work, then you're new here. Welcome. Get ready to put the work in. Now, one thing that we did talk about what was happening at this stage was that we back in January 2022, we put out the hype phase, the facing reality phase, and then the ultimate market opportunity phase. And this is what happens to assets that are undergoing similar adoption. And then you could see what's happened, obviously, as we've moved towards the jumping the chasm of adoption from early adopters to early majority where we are today. And you could see that, wow, Wall Street's here, the institutions are here, the government's here. Like it's obviously back. I remember not even too long ago, 5 years ago, the question was, do you think the US government will crush Bitcoin? Will they close the on ramps and the off ramps? Today, you have the president of the United States launching ETFs and accumulating Ethereum, Bitcoin, and so on, launching stable coins. It's obviously a different world of adoption. And now we're seeing a divergence. You have over the next few months, and this is like the clock is ticking. We're into July, into the end of the year. You're going to see a lot of people who are going to be looking for that 4-year cycle repeat of nature. We spoke last week and we talked about the video was titled Signs Bitcoin is Typing 4-year Cycle. Are you ready? And we showed what other people's views are as far as why we should be between October and December peaking. And then we gave the invalidation on that and where they're wrong. And then we set what our expectations are going to be coming into not only the end of the year, but beyond, and where we're wrong. We always want to know where we are wrong, where we have to go ahead and pivot. That is the most important thing to be able to last for decades in this space. Now, when I look at this chart, I see, okay, we have the hype phase and then the facing reality phase of Bitcoin. And I think what I want to point out is during this facing reality stage, you had this 85% drawdown, and then you had this 76% drawdown. So it was like pretty wavy. And now we're obviously seeing that changing nature. Ethereum looks a little different. So if I were to go ahead and say to myself, I'm going to go into the different nature of these two things with you in 1 second. So this is the Ethereum hype cycle. And the hype cycle goes all the way through January 2018. And it was a mega hype cycle. Then the facing reality stage looks a lot different than Bitcoin's. And what I mean by that is first you have a mega drawdown over here, 95%, mega drawdown. And for good reason. Look at the hype cycle was crazy. And Bitcoin obviously had two 85% drawdowns after its hype cycle. And then, but I look over here at the top And then I say, okay, well, that makes me feel a lot better, actually. That's a pretty big drawdown here, 80%. Okay. So I feel better because what I'm seeing since is it looks like a mega coil to me. When I look at Bitcoin's nature, I don't see that mega. I see the big drawdown. I see a big drawdown, and then I see Bitcoin coming out of that the what is ultimately facing reality stage, and I'm looking at Ethereum, and I thought Ethereum looks actually a lot healthier. And then what happens if this is like a mini cycle that happened on Ethereum? And what was happening over here is there was a lot of competition. Was Solana going to be the new Ethereum? Today, do most people think that because if I go back just a year ago and remember we were riding those positions on the upside on Solana, a lot of people thought like Ethereum is done, the next chain is going to be Solana. I wouldn't say that that's what we're seeing here today. And I can't say as Bitcoin coming out of the facing reality stage because of the nature of adoption. Could I say that same thing about Ethereum? We need to look at that in 1 second. And then did we have, Bitcoin had that 76% drawdown last bear market. Was this Ethereum's like um diminishing volatility on the downside? And is it putting in a quicker facing reality phase than Bitcoin did? And is it doing it because yes, you are seeing institutional adoption. It's much different than on Bitcoins in so much as that there's obviously the market cap of Bitcoin is much larger. The amount of institutional bid into Bitcoin is much larger, but we are seeing and beginning to see we have the spot ETFs for Ethereum. We're now seeing the birth of treasury companies, and are we beginning to see like Bitcoin being that rising tide of all boats? And it doesn't lift all boats, by the way. If you look at altcoins, right? But is it lifting the space in general, right? And is Ethereum riding its coattails over here? As obviously, well, first we got a Bitcoin spot ETF, and then of course the next turn of events is Ethereum, Bitcoin treasury companies, now Ethereum. Will you see other countries that do not understand the bullish case for Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is? And will they make the mistake of taking a strategic Ethereum reserve, right? And what I mean by that is, well, I'm not going to get into the dynamics of Ethereum and ultimately what the proof of stake, the fatal flaw that ultimately will catch up to it. And remember, when it happened, I said, well, I think this is quite bullish for Bitcoin. I mean, for Ethereum. I think Ethereum ultimately goes significantly higher, but ultimately I think it catches up to it, and I still believe that. But I do believe for where we are today that we're seeing a very similar situation that happened on Bitcoin now happening on Ethereum, and including, right, the downside volatility. Bitcoin just had a bear market of 76% drawdown in relation to its previous 84 and 85. And here you have Ethereum putting in a 66% drawdown after what was an 81 and then a 95% drawdown. Are we about to see Ethereum actually break out? And is Ethereum still in the facing reality stage, or is it about to break out? Those are questions that need to be asked. I do not have the answer to them. Could you imagine, say, well, imagine Ethereum is just a few years behind Bitcoin, and you're about to see a similar situation where Ethereum breaks above 4,800 and then has that massive sharp and rapid sharp appreciation. That seems to be what Tom Lee is suggesting, that he believes that and his team believe that's what's going to happen. And if that were to happen and you were to see some type of similarity, I don't think that, first of all, I think obviously, like all of you, I understand the enormous differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum. I don't think that many, let's say, speculators out there do. And I think that as you see Ethereum break 5,000, I don't think that it would be unreasonable to see as Ethereum went into price discovery, a lot of people will be looking at the price of Bitcoin, and right now it's 120,000, and a lot of people remember where it was prior to the election at like say $60,000, and they're like, Bitcoin not has only made a new all-time high or taking out its previous all-time high, it's now significantly above. It has gone ahead and 2x since then. And Ethereum, it's just now taking out its all-time high. And do I think it's going to 2x and go towards $10,000? I think a lot of people will believe that has the potential to happen. And then is Tom Lee out of his mind in saying, or his team out of their mind, saying by the end of the year, you could see, because again, the only way I can make that case is if you saw, is Ethereum actually and in a similar situation here, about to break to new all-time high, and then have a sharp, straight up price appreciation with that lower market cap. Remember, it doesn't take as much money coming in and flowing into Ethereum to move the price as it does on Bitcoin at this particular stage of adoption. And here, Bitcoin is just in the sustainable channel right now. And outside of a massive adoption event, I don't see Bitcoin being able to enter into an elevated rapid arc, and especially by the end of the year. I don't really see that happening yet, but I do see much of the more sustainable channel remaining in effect. But on Ethereum, I could see that potentially happening. And if you were to see a similar situation where after taking out 20,000, you saw not a 2x but a 3x, I'm trying to see where Tom potentially is coming from and what could get the price to do that. The dynamic that we're seeing right now of now larger bids into to Ethereum is definitely a factor that could definitely send up some sharp price appreciation. I want to focus more on. Remember, we were looking at structure of all different assets, and this is Bitcoin structure copied and pasted onto Ethereum. And I said, well, I don't think that's right. And what I'm going to do for you by our next session is go ahead and put on what is Ethereum structure onto Ethereum's chart. And this is Ethereum structure. And by going off of Ethereum structure in much the same way that we're able to say, let me come over to here for a second with you and say, well, for example, here we have the global lockdown lows on Bitcoin, and it's on that solid line over here. And then we have the FTX blowing up over here, and again, it's just below the solid line. And my expectation is right around that solid line outside of an event continues to hold. And then if there is an event, here you have one, two events that it's between these two lines. And right now with price trading at 120,000, I could say, listen, until and through the summer of 2027, more accurately, I think I think that you have until what is going to be the spring of 2027, just finishing the winter here, to be able to potentially accumulate Bitcoin under $120,000. Potentially. That there's also, we'll talk about it tomorrow, there's also the case to be made that you might not have that opportunity. You might have the opportunity around 100, but beyond the spring of 2027, the odds of you being able to pick up Bitcoin at 120,000 are significantly low. In other words, $55,000 Bitcoin is cheap in relation to the coming market cycle. It's a similar situation from where you are today. Does that work with Ethereum? Could you do that as well with Ethereum? And what could be the expectations? So that's what before looking at the upside price targets and whether Tom Lee is just trying to be sensational in order to garner interest into his new venture of a public company that is going ahead and accumulating Ethereum onto their balance sheet. Is he doing that, or is this actually probably what they believe is going to happen? Remember, Tom Lee in 2019 was out on CNBC and he's like, listen, Bitcoin is trading right now at $3,500. And I think that everyone should have 1 or 2% of Bitcoin in their portfolio. And they were like, what are you, absolutely nuts and crazy? Obviously, he wasn't. And so on the lower end, we just had what was a substantial shakeout, drawdown. It's a shakeout if we break above 5,000. If we break above 5,000, look at this line over here. I just want to highlight this line for you. So I'll put it into yellow. And you could see this was the June 2022 low. It was interesting that as we came into December, in November, Bitcoin made a lower low than its June low, and Ethereum didn't. And you could see that Ethereum stayed above the yellow line until you had this technical breakdown. And was that a liquidity grab ultimately? And don't forget, when you get big moves, they're over exasperated in one direction, and then you get that mean reversion. And if this technical breakdown was over exasperated, and then you see the snap up, if you get a breakout above 5,000, above 4,800, that's usually something after liquidity grab that's going to have higher potential. A lot of people sold their Ethereum over here, and a lot of people are going to, as price rises, want to get back into that trade. Not only that, is this going to become a case of, I'm sorry, son, it doesn't matter anymore. Thanks for getting us here, but we'll take over from now. And like on Bitcoin, does retail not matter anymore? Is Ethereum headed sooner into that direction? It could be. It depends on what Peter Thiel, Tom Lee are able to do. And then what other type of other retail corporations, that's in quotes, come over here and start getting into the market. Just quickly wondering over here, while it's great to have everyone here for the live, if you would take a moment, share some love, spread some love, right? And hit the thumbs up. Really, really appreciate that. And again, if you're not yet subscribed, do go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I love what we do. I do believe what we do is amongst the highest signal out there. So what we're looking at right now, by the way, is the downside. And this was a major event. This was a major event when you had the 3 Celsius meltdown and you had, Ethereum trade into the yellow line. I like it before because it was the 2019 high, and then you had the global lockdowns, and then this is where you came into. So this was strong resistance, and then look when you broke out above there, it was retested and confirmed as support, mega important level, and then after the breakdown over here, it was tested again. So I would say that there's a good chance this line shouldn't break. It just broke though, that for that what looks like it's shaping up to be a liquidity grab. And if that's the case and we get a liquidity grab over here and break out to new highs, I think that it's going to help give the move some juice. But I'm more concerned about going forward. What should we say or could we say is our low? By the way, if this yellow line breaks, this highlighted yellow line that's connecting the 2020 low and then the most recent 2025 low, that's a mega technical breakdown that shouldn't happen if it were to happen. And at that point in time, regardless of what your expectations were, you better go ahead and you better manage risk around that. So that line stays right now until we break out above. My own idea is that if we break out above 5,000, that likely there's a good chance that this yellow line that we have over here, that is going to become what is the equivalent of the solid line on 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 Bitcoin, and I'm bringing it down to the wick over there. And that zone is what my expectations would be. So I would say on the breakout above and whatever happens going forward, that, coming into this is a year later than we were talking about on Bitcoin for 120,000. But I would venture to say that, you would have potentially to pick up Ethereum at 5,000. Pretend right now Ethereum jumps up to $10,000. And I'm going to say, well, through March of 2028, there's a good chance that you'll be able to buy Ethereum and accumulate Ethereum around that number of 5,000. And how often do you see mega breakouts like that retested? Remember what happened on Bitcoin? And you could see that. I think it's easier to see if this is view over here, or this one. And you had here's the line, the night, here's the mega line, here's the mega breakout that we've been talking about all session, and that breakout was retested. So could you picture and it doesn't mean you like, could you picture the potential through the end of the winter 2028 of having the opportunity here to accumulate Ethereum? I'm trying to subdue FOMO, long-term FOMO on Ethereum, because many people will have it if we get a breakout and some acceleration. Now, usually what I believe happens is that on a breakout, and we're talking about top side targets now. On a breakout, you could see that this is 2018 high, a lower high, and then my expectations, and we did an amazing video on this. We did a phenomenal video on why people's 2028 expectations are likely too low and what we believe is going to happen. If you haven't seen that video, I'll go ahead and try tomorrow and in the sessions ahead to kind of just recap for you everything that's happening. But what I believe happens is much like you see here. And again, right now you have in the lower over here, this is just another asset that has gone through the hype phase. Then it's facing reality phase. And then the breakout into the ultimate market opportunity. And what you see happens on this walk up that's very similar to what you're seeing now is eventually you get back into the top tiers from the hype cycle. This is the top tier over here. This one hasn't particularly gotten there. It doesn't mean it can't, but you can see it comes in lower. And that is my expectation for Bitcoin, and why I say, like, here's the top tier, here's the top quarter, top third is coming down to here, in between here. I think this is where Bitcoin is good. You're going to see Bitcoin walk up and towards that top of the area, which is why I believe coming into the end of the decade, people between 2028 and 2030, people's expectations are subdued about actually what's going to happen. And then we have our low expectations. And I could say to you, well, I believe by 2030, January 2030, my expectation is Bitcoin is trading on the low end at $450,000. And I feel very confident about that. Now, that's much different if you look at power law. Power law looks at diminishing volatility. Their floor is much different. Their floor is all the way down here at $170,000 into January 2030. However, their floor has been breached once, has been breached twice, and our floor seems to be a lot more consistent. The difference here are people who believe that Bitcoin is undergoing S-curve adoption, and people who believe that it's going through power law adoption. Again, very soon we find out who was right. I believe that we are right, that we are correct and have a better read on what's happening. Tomorrow's session is going to really, really lining up the macro and what's taking place here, with fiscal dominance taking like trumping monetary policy, and why it matters over the next year or two, and 3 and 4 years potentially. And really a lot of people are going to be once again left behind. What do I mean by left behind? There are a lot of people who have been in this space now for a long time, and a lot of those people obviously at the wrong time continue to accumulate, a lot of altcoins. And when it was a Bitcoin story, and as Bitcoin now is at 120,000, they're waiting for the moment to be able to hopefully to take profit and sell those altcoins because they want to get into Bitcoin. And the problem here is that this is no longer a retail story. Retail is irrelevant. I started telling that a year ago, people were like, what is this guy talking about? What are the Google searches saying? And now, as you see all of these corporates continually purchasing Bitcoin like people are like, oh, it doesn't matter anymore. Absolutely. Now, if we get a mega breakout above 5,000 into the end of the year, right? And we see something like happened on Bitcoin in 2021, the first quarter of 2021, well, then potentially Tom Lee's targets are like, I guess, within range. So again, this is the top tier. And if you look at what happened with Bitcoin most recently, after the 2017-18 top, it came down towards a lower deviation band. And that would be my expectation on Ethereum. So here's the top band over here, right? And what's interesting to me, it's very interesting to me. So listen, like, here's where I'm wrong. Okay, I'm going to tell you where I'm wrong. But in Bitcoin, you had the 2017 hype top, and Ethereum's top, it touched the hype top. That's significant. That's different to me. But I would suspect that Ethereum puts in a lower high. So let me just go ahead and just grab this, and I'm going to just look at two areas with you. So to do that, I like to be exact, actually. So I'm looking for where price. So I have this peak over here, and it doesn't really line up too well anywhere else. This is except right here, it was retested, right? It tried to hold us support right here. It couldn't. Here it's resistance. It's a decent line. And I'm going to put this line here as green, I guess. And the reason for that is that's my expectation of what would be a pretty strong move into the end of the year, and let's look at what that price would signal to us. So let me come back to the weekly. So let's pretend we get a mega breakout over here, and yeah, I mean, this for me, that was wrong. Sorry about that. That's way high. I'm trying to bring it down. I thought what I was looking at was down over here in this line over here where we have that resistance. Here's, you can say it's support. That for me would be elevated. That's around $10,000. And if we were able to do that, now that's much different than what Bitcoin did on its breakout of 19,600, of 20,000, and then in 2021 it didn't stop at 40,000. This would be the equivalent of stopping at 40,000. And if it did, like, I think if I say that, well, normally what happens is we put in a lower low. Now let me just go ahead and check over here, and I hope you can follow me in what we're doing over here, because it's absolutely breakthrough. And yeah, I can't imagine it goes higher than that by the end of the year. Now, if it did, and even if it goes that high, and rather than saying that, by the end of the year, the target is that Bitcoin should be trading between 10 and 15,000 or 7,500 or anything like that. No, actually, my theory is more, if we break out above here, if we're able to break out to new all-time highs, then likely we have set a floor, and that floor is that yellow line. And I could going forward that my expectations are, I could see where we are into the future and what I would expect the low to be. And anytime we got towards the elevated area, that's probably a time to begin subduing your expectations and maybe even start distributing out, taking some profit. But being that we touched the top of the high phase, is Tom Lee crazy by saying it's possible to hit towards the 15,000? And I don't want to say it, but it's not unreasonable, I suppose, right? I don't like to have expectations like that, but I could see us coming towards into the top of that resistance. Is there any asset that has broken above its top deviation? That's a question I would like to take a brief look at with you. So let me go ahead and what would happen if at any point in time we broke out the hype phase resistance? Is that possible? I don't think so personally. But let me go ahead and just take a brief look with you because it's not really what I think. Well, what I think kind of sets expectations to dig in further. So let me jump over here and go to structure. And I just want to, like, you can see Amazon structure. I'm just, for those that are kind of bring it in over here. And here's like the hype phase of Amazon all the way up over here. And you can see that hype phase, facing reality, walking like Bitcoin is now, and then towards the top tier. That's expectations. Here you can see Microsoft did that. Like Microsoft had, you remember Windows 96? And that's when Windows 96, that it's actually hype phase, a different facing reality phase, but that's when Windows 96 and beyond is when it's set off into its ultimate market opportunity. And here's one Microsoft actually breaks above. So you could see like from here on in, Microsoft broke above as we came into the dot-com bubble. Microsoft did break above its deviation. So something to watch out for with Ethereum. I honestly believe that. And so something to watch out for. And then obviously Microsoft went into a new facing reality phase when you saw all that competition. And then as it was able to get into cloud computing, went into a new ultimate market opportunity. Another one is gold, right? And gold has had many. So let me come back to the original, the first, and now I'm trying to find out like, so gold is much different. The thing about gold too, and the thing about with all of you, as you know, as I told you last week, was that I just copied and pasted the Bitcoin lines on there, and much how each asset has its own structure, and how Ethereum has its own structure that's different. And I pointed it out to you over here, like this is copied and pasted, this is exact. And I wonder if that needs to be here done for gold, because what I'm trying to figure out is what happens if you get above the hype cycle deviation. So here's when Bitcoin went through its second mega bull run. And in this case, it's hard to know what the top deviation was. We came towards it. So again, guys, I'm here every day trying to figure it out and learn. Here's gold on its last and most recent um, breaking out over here and into close to the top deviation. And we know that gold is very overbought and it continues to run up, including right now. Let me just jump over and you can see gold today is trading at $3,400, and as silver is continuing to make 36 look comfortable, breaking above, retesting, breaking out here to 39, and we do believe on its way towards 50. And once it breaks out, a lot of people that I know who have been holding silver longer than they want to, expecting price action to occur on a different timeline. As silver breaks above 50, they're going to be willingly and ready to begin to distribute and sell their silver. However, I think that their timing is going to ultimately be very, very, very wrong. Much like gold is breaking out of that cup and handle, silver here is breaking out of its cup and handle. I think it's going to go very hard and very fast. And I said to you, the one thing that could change what I believe is the remember I called it the super cycle of gold. The one thing that I thought could change that would be a return to growth. And I do believe we are headed in that direction as the administration is embracing we got to grow out of the debt. However, because we're not in an old regime and we're now into the turn into fiscal dominance, meaning that, look, it's all about maintaining the deficits and you just got to go. It doesn't matter. At that point, I do believe that's a different scenario here for gold. And I think that the current, why I think we're very, very overbought, and on the, you could see it over here on the monthly chart if I jump down over, and you could see that the RSI over here remains strongly overbought. Look at that. In the past, you see the RSI reach these heights over here, 83, above 80, and it doesn't last there very long, much like this one. But here we continue to see that overbought nature, and when we do get the pullback, when the RSI comes back towards 70 and or below, again, my own belief is that once you take out whatever the top is, that's when you begin to see the resumption upwards. Oh, I think Ethereum is going above 6K. That I do believe that one or two things could happen. Let's clarify. There's nothing wrong with your thoughts, except I'm going to say that if you have over here, you could see this triangle that's developing with the red line over here. And if you have a liquidity grab to the downside and then break out up, that normally is what precedes a big move. If you take out the all-time high, I think that the initial break is going to see above 6,000. So here's the initial break. Just want you to see this. So this line over here, we have the resistance. This was a big area of support. You could see it here. And then you could see that line of support became that resistance here. That's the expectation of where we probably break out above. And it could be this lower one for sure. This one and this one. And initially on a break above 5,000, you probably hit 51. Maybe you have a hiccup. But this one over here, 6,400. That's where I think that there's a good chance that this line over here, and again, it's usually right below it, that into the end of the year is more than like that's a lot more reasonable to me of what potential could be, and that's under $7,000, right? You can see it. I would say that, you know what, here's Bitcoin and let me find over here. Loving seeing these positions now. Cardano, 28%. Solana finally entering on the long side within days, up 16%. Seeing a 46%. By the way, Bitcoin bull runs is the only thing continuing to hold and open. I wanted to get into the differences today between Bitcoin bull runs and then the 8-hour swing traders with you. And I have that set up, and I'll do it that tomorrow with you, and I'll go over all the past performance or sometime this week when it fits into the flow, because tomorrow's a big session. And then to see the stocks also catching this wave over here. Nvidia, TQQQ, Tesla finally into the market, MicroStrat, loving it. Well, I was looking for this though. I was looking for this. And I know it must be terrible for you guys if when I'm looking at my chicken scratch and it gets a little hard to read. And so we had the two lines we were looking at on Ethereum breaking out, and this was like this is the equivalent of the first one, and then this one up over here, the orange line is like that's my expectations of where we could come and top out into on this on this initial breakout. However, a measured move is much higher. A measured move is 170. There you go. By the end of the year, a measured move off of this breakout to the upside is 170. That's actually right into where we have the top of our channel and what our expectations on the upside could potentially be. So that seems to be well within pace, and it's similar here. Initial breakout, I'll walk it back over here, is likely into this line over here, which is somewhere around, if it's September, 5,300, and then into the end of the year to see this top line over here, which we looked at. That I'll highlight it a different color. I'll highlight it like orange. I don't know what to highlight it for you. That would be what I believe on a breakout to new all-time highs. Breakout to new all-time highs with shifting dynamics, institutional inflows beginning into Ethereum, and then talking about companies that are looking to buy and hold and to accumulate more Ethereum to buy and hold after liquidity grab. I think that that's a reasonable expectation. If you get the breakout above, by the end of the year, you could be looking at 6,800. If you get a Bitcoin-esque 2021 first quarter breakout. Ethereum breaks above 20,000. It moves sharply into 40,000. The equivalent is Ethereum moving towards 9,600 and into that green line. That's not out of the question if we run into what I believe we're going to run into, and that is as we move past the end of September, and we're seeing equities here being able to run towards a strong finish into the end of the year, which is the direction that I think that we're headed. Then I could see Ethereum having the potential to do that. Look, I'd rather say if Ethereum breaks out above 4,800, first target right above 5,000, 5,300, likely. It's an upward sloping trend line. And then into the end of the year, this trend line, a test of it seems very reasonable. But if you break above, and you like, I don't think Tom Lee is necessarily out of his mind, even though it's not what I embrace, and it seems sensational to me. Woo! Which video about trading? We did how to trade Bitcoin in a bull market. And in that video, we talked about things like at all times expect a 30% drawdown. And as we look at Bitcoin trading in this new bull market, we've seen multiple 30% drawdowns. And I think that's a really good, let's say, an expectation to expect at least a 30% drawdown. However, chill, we like at this point in time, we've come so much further in that, like, you know, you like the bull market, Bitcoin bull markets is going to keep you on the right side and perform like no other. This is actually a pretty good segue, I guess. Something I could cover as a bonus over here and didn't want to. And it's the difference between like Bitcoin and its bull market runs and trading on the 8-hour swing trades. And I think that it's important to like, and if you go into the Nuggets channel, you could see a video. It's pinned in the Discord, and in the Nuggets channel, it talks about the difference in performance. I have to go back here all the way to 2010 so that you could see the difference in Kager. And the reason I have to do that is because as we go forward from like 2020 to today, it counts the Kager all the way back to the beginning. For example, here you could see from on Bitcoin bull runs, and you see from 2020 till today, it's saying the Kager is 20%. But obviously the Kager is not 20% when you have a 490% return. You have a minus 4% return, a 38% return, 115%, because it's counting them all the way back to 2010. So the overall Kager, you could see out of all of our Bitcoin bull runs plus 8-hour swing traders, this is the original CTM 2.0. Still does well, but you could see that the best performing is going to be the Bitcoin bull runs and the least amount of drawdowns, less than 20% all the way throughout Bitcoin's history. Now, it's different if you look from 2020 till today. And by the way, like, yeah, you could outperform buy and hold easily. And if you go back towards looking at, like, imagine this, buy and hold in comparison towards, like, it's not even comparable when you factor in buy and hold versus navigating the markets and knowing when to be in the market and when out. But if you look at BTC 101, which is the buy side only, since 2020, it's outperforming. Again, the Kager is not 20%. You have 91, 133, 17%, 76%, 45%, and so far minus 10%. But it's the best performing since 2020, but not with drawdown. Well, max drawdown too is only less than 16%. So the issue here, the problem here is that you have I mean, forget CTM 2.0, the original. That was, again, CTM X is built on top of CTM 2.0. CTM 2.0 is magnificent. It's the foundation, but not to include this one. I mean, you're looking at 19%. Again, that's not the CAGR because it's going from 2010 to present. It's hard to decide which one to utilize. It's a CTM problem when you have too many good options. So it comes down to, how often do I want to be in the market and trade? And something like a Bitcoin bull run is going to obviously take much less trades and be able to ride the trends. It's a hard question to answer which one is preferred. And I just showed you even through 2020, Bitcoin 101 on the buy side it's a contender. So with Bitcoin, we have too many good options. We don't have those options with Ethereum, Solana, Cardano. Same thing with stocks. We have only one option on the daily for each. These are the 1 hours, the ones you see below it. I have no idea. I don't know how to value what Tom Lee's what Bitmine would be potentially trading at during this early hype phase. I'm not able to say. So I could give you pretty strong ideas of we get X to happen, if we get a breakout to happen, what expectations are on the upside, where we're wrong on the downside. I can't speculate on that because it's not something that I would consider myself to be very well informed enough to speak on. That's why. D-Power, the US dollar, Japanese yen seems to be breaking out to the upside over here. And let me zoom in on it. We're rejected. So when you see this line that we had, and this was the outermost breakout, and I'm pretty sure that, look, that's structure. Why does Jordan say that? Well, you see the resistance here, and then the support, and then the resistance, and then the resistance, and then this was confirmed to support. I mean, that's structure, right? So I bring it down here, and I say, well, here's the support. Of course, we broke above. Here's resistance, resistance. That's structure. I have it over here at the top. We've broken above, but you could see that becomes a one touch, and you can see the two touches into it on the daily. And yeah, so no, we haven't broken out. It looks like we broke out. It looks like it's dropping hard and could derail. So I think as far as the Japanese yen unwind, right? We have this one touch deviation on the downside. We've looked at this through structure on various assets. And once we break the lower line we have over here, this would say that we're entering into downwards, sideways consolidation at best, right? I think that you have to break that line for that to be confirmed. And you could see as you move out into September, and September could get rocky, right? If we break below there, I have this line of support that's been touched twice in the past year and a half as like the ultimate like confirmation. And yeah, trading below that 100, just below 140, that just above 139, that for me would be the breakdown. And what we're seeing here is continued consolidation. It's the dollar. Remember, we just looked at the dollar earlier in this session, and it's breaking down over here potentially, where if it closes below today, and that could take some pressure off the yen if the dollar begins selling off again. But it's a tough one. It's not always easy, and this is a tough one to stay on the right side of. So that's all I could say. Our early breakout was all the way down here, but we wicked above and came back in it. This was the second one above, and should you say that right there, I'm trying to go off of what I believe to be resistance and the wick below but support, and it's just the guideline. Like above, above 146 and upward sloping is still quite bullish, but it's a tough one. It's a very tough one. Yeah, Doggy Nation. I think as Bitmine is the leader here. It's the top dog, so to speak, with who's behind it. Peter Thiel and Fundstrat and Tom Lee and maybe I would imagine potentially you have like MicroStrategy esqueness goodness going on to it. In the beginning here. So likely it's going to be an outperformer. Likely it's going to be an outperformer, and it remains to be seen. When you start seeing the dilution, you have MicroStrategy. MicroStrategy is also a level above in how they're able to orchestrate these different products surrounded by their initial holdings. And compared to just companies just getting started, but there's a dilution taking place. Whereas like money, speculative capital, where it might have gone all into MicroStrategy, is now also going into Metaplanet, is now also going into 21, is now also going into ABCDF, like the plethora of different Bitcoin treasury companies as well. And then now you're seeing Ethereum treasury companies, speculative companies launched. Does that become something that sucks capital away from Bitcoin treasury companies? Is Ethereum's price still so small that it doesn't matter? And you're able to see sharper price appreciation. Guys, I'm about to say goodbye, but I'm so sorry. I'm going to say goodbye and I can't wait till tomorrow where we're going to go at it again. So have a beautiful day, everyone. Tomorrow, we're going to crush it. Today, we crushed it. Everyone, have a beautiful day. God bless you, and I'll see you all soon.